Welcome back to Outside Views, and today we're taking a long, hard look at a relationship that is looking more like a tragic, unrequited love story every single day. And that's the United Kingdom and the European Union in 2026. And my personal view is that we are watching a slow-motion car crash where the British government is finally trying to put the pieces back together, but the EU has already moved on and is now giving them the cold shoulder of the century. It's January 5th when I'm filming this, and the reality of Brexit is no longer a debate. It's a documented economic disaster that has left the UK stranded on a cold island of its own making. And the outside view is that while the British public has clearly woken up from the Brexit fever dream, the European Union is in no hurry to help them fix the mess they made. Just look at the polling numbers. Only 31% of Britons still believe leaving the EU was a good idea, while a massive 56 to 62% now call it a mistake. But here's the brutal truth. Wanting to come back to the party doesn't mean you're actually invited, and right now, Brussels is keeping the door very much locked. I believe that Keir Starmer's government is finding out the hard way that taking back control was a one-way street, and the price of admission for getting back into even the smallest rooms is now prohibitively high. And the shift in tone in Westminster over the last few months has been nothing short of extraordinary. In early December, we heard the Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Minister David Lammy say out loud what everyone already knew. It's obvious that leaving the EU has caused severe damage to our economy. And he didn't stop there. He openly discussed the advantages of a customs union, a move that would have been political suicide just a couple of years ago. And a few days later, the Liberal Democrats even brought a motion to the House of Commons to mandate the government to negotiate a customs union. While it was a symbolic move, over 100 MPs voted for it, including 13 from the Labour Party itself. And my personal view is that the Brexit omerta is finally over. The wall of silence has broken because the economic pain is simply too great to ignore. The British export industry has been hollowed out. Touring musicians are being strangled by visa red tape, and tourists are spending their holidays standing in border queues. And yet, despite the sudden British enthusiasm for a reset, the response from the European Union has been a polite but freezing no thank you in many cases. Let's talk about the London summit in May 2025 again, which was supposed to be the new chapter. Ursula von der Leyen was there, Keir Starmer was there, and they signed a strategic partnership that promised cooperation on defense, energy and trade barriers. But what has actually happened since then? Almost nothing. Negotiations on agricultural products only recently started because the EU member states took months just to agree on a negotiating mandate. And every time the UK asks for a bit of flexibility, the EU responds with a rigid rule book that seems designed to remind the British exactly what they walked away from. And my view is that the EU is not being difficult just for the sake of it, as many Brexiteers will claim now. They are being strategic. They have no interest in making Brexit look like a success, because if they make it too easy for the UK to have the benefits of the club without the membership fees, which would be insane anyway, other skeptics in Europe might start getting ideas. And as one German official reportedly put it, we have no interest in making Brexit a success on our cost. And the most shocking example of this cold shoulder happened just a few weeks ago at the end of November, you will remember. The UK wanted to join the new EU-wide defense fund, the Security Action for Europe, or SAFE, which provides low-interest loans for military procurement. Given the war in Ukraine and the geopolitical instability in the Middle East, you would think the EU would want the UK's massive defense industry involved. But instead, Brussels demanded a staggering £6 billion entry fee, that's roughly 6.75 billion euros, just for the right to participate. And yes, you can say this was a poison pill offer. They knew the British couldn't and wouldn't pay it, especially because Canada joined the same program for a symbolic fee of just 10 million euros. But they have very different industries, by the way. But the message to London was loud and clear. You are not a partner, you are a third country. and we will charge you until it hurts. And as a result, the talks collapsed in December, and the UK has officially confirmed it will not restart negotiations in 2026 because it simply isn't value for money. And I think they are wrong there, but that's a different topic. And it's not just defense. The carbon border is the next big wall. On January 1st, something started, and that's called the EU's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM, and it is fully applicable. And this means that British companies exporting things like steel, aluminum, and fertilizers to Europe are now facing even more paperwork and potential carbon taxes unless the UK perfectly aligns its own carbon pricing with the EU. And I heard that people already said is that the UK is being forced into vassalage by stealth. We all remember Starmer has drawn red lines saying he won't go back into the single market or the customs union. Well, he can't anyway. But the EU is making it clear that without those things, which only membership brings, if it's not a customs union, there will be no special treatment. And Professor Anand Menon, a leading expert on EU-UK relations, is absolutely right when he says the EU doesn't share the UK's sense of urgency. The EU has bigger fish to fry, and they've already secured access to the only thing they really wanted from Britain, and that's the fishing waters. And the outside view is that Britain is pining for a relationship that no longer exists. The 2025 summit was a restoration of factory settings, but the factory has moved on to a different city and changed its phone number. And I believe that the British government is still stuck in the mindset of negotiating with equals, while the EU is treating the UK like a medium-sized neighbor that needs to be kept at arm's length. The strategic partnership is currently just a fancy name for a series of meetings that don't produce results so far, except Erasmus. And while Starmer talks about rebuilding trust, the EU is watching the rise of Reform UK and the populist right in Britain with deep suspicion. Why would Brussels make a long-term deal with a government that might be replaced by Nigel Farage in 3 years? And the political instability in the UK is the final nail in the coffin of any real rapprochement this year. So in conclusion, the cold shoulder from Brussels is the ultimate "I told you so." If you are watching my channel for years, already years ago I had a mug that said that in my merch. It's not there anymore, but still would be suitable. And the British public is ready for a rethink. The British economy is screaming for a rethink, but the European Union has moved on to strategic autonomy. They are building a fortress Europe that doesn't have room for a global Britain that wants all the perks with none of the responsibilities. And my personal view is that we are entering a long dark period of managed decline for UK-EU relations where every small win will be bought at a massive cost. The year of reset in 2025 turned out to be a year of reality checks. And as we step into 2026, the British people are realizing that it is much easier to leave the house than it is to be invited back in for dinner. The bridge is broken, the gap is widening, and right now, no one on the other side of the channel is reaching out to pull the UK back in. So I mentioned this in another video. As long as there's no party running a manifesto on that one and winning the next general election, on manifesto on rejoining the EU, even if the word is wrong, but let's, for the sake of the whole thing, just do that. The EU has no reason to give them anything big.